Let's start this topic, natural selection. So what do you already know? What is evolution? So you can put it, I was going to do a Padlet, but I'll just shout out. What do you know about evolution, or what is evolution? What's your background? You've probably heard of evolution. How would you describe evolution? Okay, I got something in the chat box here. The development of a species through time. Okay, good. Anybody else have a way of saying evolution? Organisms have evolved. What does it mean when we say they have evolved? Good luck. To say an organism has evolved, what are we saying? Basically, we're just saying that they've changed over time. So Lucy or Paige, Paige gave us that it's the development. Oh, okay, we have two different ones. Good. Good, we have more conversation now. Thank you so much. So we have the development of species through time, change to survive. That's a good one. When species develop to fit their environmental needs. These cover a lot of things. So we have a fitness, we have an environmental aspect that they need to survive to fit in that environment. And so to survive, sometimes there has to be a change. Is it going to be a change during one individual's lifetime? Or is it a change over several generations? What do you think? Okay. Yeah, it's over several generations. So our short mini lesson, what we know of evolution is the mechanism that drives evolution is natural selection. So that's the topic. Natural selection was proposed by Charles Darwin. We normally would go into a whole Charles Darwin piece, but we're going to be short. Give him credit for the fact that he's given us the scientific explanation for evolution. Back in the day, most scientists actually did not believe in evolution because they couldn't explain how it would occur. So they thought that a deity had put every organism here on Earth in its present form and that it did not change. So on his 5-year journey around the world in the HMS Beagle, he went from England to South America, collected lots of biological, geological species, and he was seeing changes that could only be explained through evolution, through natural selection. So, what he saw on the Galapagos Islands, like organisms that were similar to past organisms, but they had changed. So he saw this in the fossil record, for example, could only be explained through change. So individuals have physical and behavioral traits, right? Maybe you're brown, maybe you're white, maybe you're fast, maybe you're slow, maybe you sing a beautiful song, maybe you don't, maybe you can build the greatest nest there is, maybe you know a certain dance, right? So it could be a behavioral or it could be a physical trait. Whatever, the physical or the behavioral trait gave them some sort of an advantage. They were more likely to survive if they were fast. They could evade a predator, right? If they were brown like the tree, they could blend with the tree. If they sang a wonderful song, they could induce a mate, and then their genes are passed on through generations. So this is fitness, the ability to survive and pass on your traits. So fitness is really referring to the genes. So by surviving to pass on that trait becomes more common. The slowpoke individuals got caught and eaten, the slowpoke gene fades away, right? The fast gene is surviving, breeding, passing on that gene. So the population over time changes to a fast gene, for example. This is what we mean by natural selection. One group is selected for, one group is selected against. You guys did the antibiotic resistant bacteria, right? So the antibiotic offered a selective pressure, you would refer to. It's going to weed out those that aren't antibiotic resistant, and it's going to leave those with the antibiotic resistant gene that will breed, well, they don't breed, they're bacteria, that will multiply and produce more cells that are antibacteria resistant, right? So over time, that population changed to a group that was only resistant to bacteria. So in order for natural selection to exist, there really are 4 principles that we had to understand. First of all, that there's a variation. There was a brown and a white. There was a fast and a slow. There was a good song and a bad song, right? There's a variation within population. If there was no variation, we all would have an equal opportunity to survive. Because some are fast and some are slow, the slow is more likely to be eaten than the fast, right? So there's a variation, and that variation is inherited. There would be no change over time if these genes weren't passed from the parents to the offspring. Like if you're just fast in your generation and you don't pass on that fast gene, like if it wasn't a genetic code, then that there would not be a change over several generations. So variations must be inherited. The fact that more organisms are produced than will survive, that's called overproduction or excessive reproduction. So there is a competition for resources, for habitats, for food, water, shelter, mates. All of those things provide competition. And so if there was enough for everybody, right, there wouldn't be that dying out factor. So the fact that you have too many for the environment to support, some of them will die out. Those that are dying out have that weaker trait, if you will. And the variation, perhaps I should have moved up this to here. The variation like speed, song, dance, the variation increases that reproductive success. You call these adaptations when the variation gives them an advantage, adaptations. So that increases the reproductive success. Here's a short example. That variation will become more common over time because the other one is fading out because they're not mating and surviving, right? So here's an example. There's two worms, some that eat at night, some that eat during the day. Birds during the day come out and they eat only the day eating worms. Okay. The nocturnal worms, those that eat at night, are in their burrows during this time, so they don't get eaten. Each spring, when the worms reproduce, they have about 500 babies, but only 100 of these 500 ever become old enough to reproduce. So we want to see where Darwin's points, where these principles of natural selection are exhibited in this example. So what worm has the natural selection selected against? Is it the day urinal or the night urinal? What do you guys think? Who is going to survive? Those that are eating during the day or those that eat at night? Those that eat at night. So nature has selected for the night eaters. The day eaters are going to get eaten, so nature has selected against them. It's a bad trait. So some variations are favorable. In this case, eating at night was favorable. More offspring are produced than survive. There were 500 babies, but only 100 of them will survive. Those that survive have favorable traits. So the ones that, of that 500, the 100 that are surviving are those that eat at night. The population will change over time. The day urinals will start to diminish. Over time, they'll be gone, right? Because they all get eaten. They don't pass on their traits. Those that are surviving to eat at night, breed, reproduce, and pass on the nocturnal trait, eating at night. So that's the basic concept of natural selection. Basically, the strong survive to pass on their traits, and then that gene becomes more prevalent. What questions do you have? Short and sweet. Okay. So where do the changes come from? It might be environmental changes. So maybe you're suited for an environment where the tree bark is dark. And then if something happened in the environment that caused that tree bark to be light, you would no longer be suited for it. So there'll be a selection now against the dark bug, if you will. There's dark mice and light mice. So there's a sandy beach next to a volcano. The light mice blend with the sandy beach. They don't get eaten by the eagles. There's a volcanic eruption. The volcano spits out the black lava. It hardens. Now the white mice are pretty easily seen on the black background. So now the white mice are going to get eaten and the black mice are going to survive to pass on their traits. So the environmental changes can shift the population frequencies, degree of variation within the species. So these organisms, this is one type of auger shell. And you can imagine a sandy bottom, rocky bottom, coral bottom, right? These are going to probably exist in different areas depending on what the bottom of the ocean is like. Competition for limited resources, we talked about those. And then gene mutation rates. Ultimately, your DNA creates your genes, right? And we talked about the fact that there are changes in the genes. We've talked about silent mutations, and some mutations are beneficial and some are not beneficial. But the gene ultimately changes, and that is how we get our variations. So we all started out with type O blood. Then there was a mutation that created A blood. And then there was a mutation that created B blood. So it changed over time because of the DNA mutations. So we are going to now do a natural selection Webquest. So we got 20, 30 minutes. Here's the first video. So mostly it's like watch a little video and answer a couple questions. So if you want to open up your worksheet that looks like this, if you haven't already answered these questions, you could answer them while I play the video out for all of us. And that way we're all accomplishing it at the same time. And after that, I will turn you loose and you can do it at your own pace. This is not due until Tuesday when we come back. So have it done in the morning, please. So at this point, we saw two different variations, the fat fish and the skinny fish. We saw how one adaptation was beneficial in a certain environment, and the other trait was beneficial in a different environment or when the environment changed. Okay, so basically you're going to go through a few different examples via video and then answer the questions that follow. So do you have any questions for me? Okay.